Hello and welcome back to another episode of Inside the Asperger Studios. Are you looking for another inspirational story about living with autism and ADHD? Well, my next guest has got just such a story. So sit back, relax, and grab your favorite beverage and stay tuned for an incredible conversation. See you there.
I wanna believe in the truth, but only see what I'm shown. Got the freedom to choose, but can't decide on my own. Follow what the group is thinking, bottle up my intuition till it's
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Inside the Asperger Studios. Today I'm joined with Shawnee. Welcome to the show, Shawnee.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So you have autism and ADHD. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your life?
Well, it's a busy one, we'll say that. And it has been ever since I was a child. I wasn't actually diagnosed until last year, so on what's called a later in life diagnosis. And interestingly, the diagnosis gave me an answer for many things that I'd been questioning. But actually, what I didn't anticipate was that it would give me more questions as well. It would make me uh, explore things in a little bit more detail as to where it came from and was it something that was inherited or was it something that was just maybe a learned behavior from relatives, from friends, things that I'd inherited, that kind of thing. The biggest challenge I think with having autism and ADHD that I'm learning to manage right now is the cognitive hyperactivity, busy brain, as I like to call it. Usually I'll wake up first thing in the morning, it's immediately many thoughts, multiple thoughts running through the brain. And then quite often those thoughts will be interrupted by one another. Excuse me. That can be very exhausting. And consequently, I get very tired very quickly. So right now, I'm learning how to manage that with things like I do a lot of journaling. So instead of just sitting with the thoughts and just letting it go around and around, I will write down whatever it is that's going around in my head. Um, a good diet, a good consistent diet. The biggest game changer I noticed was cutting out processed sugars. That really alleviated the intensity of the busy brain, if you like. Um, and regular exercise. Keeping my body busy meant that it was a great distraction for my brain. If I'm physically moving myself, whether that's going for a walk or doing some sort of exercise, doing something physically taxing, really just helped me keep my thoughts as unintense as possible, if that makes sense. It doesn't necessarily stop it. It still means that I have a busy brain, but
Mhm.
it just makes everything feel that little bit more, a little easier to handle, shall we say. So, in short, my life is busy. We'll say that. My life is busy.
Now, before you got diagnosed, were you feeling like you were on the outside looking in?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I remember sitting down with the psychiatrist, and the way that I described it was as if the whole world was having a conversation, and I was only ever on the periphery of it. It didn't matter what people were talking about. It didn't matter what type of person it was, anything like that. I never felt like I was quite in. I never felt like I quite got it or that people quite got me. And it would be only once in a blue moon that I would connect with somebody on something. And I was finding that when I did have those connections, I would put everything I possibly could emotionally into it because it was such a rarity for me to have a connection. If I'd sit and have a conversation with somebody on a topic that for once I really did genuinely find interesting, and as I found out after being diagnosed, was probably hyper focusing on, I,
Mhm.
I I really struggled. I really struggled to get that connection with people. And that's a very lonely place to be in. I'm sure you've had it as well, where you sit and you think, well, why is it that I'm not connecting with people? what's wrong with me? You automatically ask yourself that question, what's wrong with me? The truth is, there's nothing wrong with you. It's
No.
just, there's got to find somebody, got to find your tribe, I suppose. You got to find your people, which fortunately now I have, and I still am. But yes, it was quite lonely beforehand, and as I say, feeling like you're just on the periphery of every conversation, never quite in it.
Now, I'm guessing your ADHD was diagnosed first, then autism just recently.
Correct, yes. So actually what happened was this. The ADHD was a full-on start to finish diagnosis, and the psychiatrist essentially said to me that what they do when they diagnose autism is that a lot of the questions that they ask for ADHD are the same as the questions that they would ask during an autism assessment. And basically, I'd scored very, very high. So that basically meant, look, the chances are yes. So the official diagnosis came out as yes, 100% ADHD, and mild autism were the words that were used to be specific. To which I clapped back and said, well, there's nothing mild about what's going on. So I don't know about that. But what I found most interesting was how many things that were attributed to ADHD are also autism traits, how much the one bleeds into the other, and how they both lend to one another, I suppose. Because actually, when I went in looking for an ADHD diagnosis, I was not expecting to be told, yes, you are ADHD. I was expecting to be told, no, you are 100% autistic. So when the psychiatrist said, this is ADHD, I was very surprised. Now it makes complete sense. Now it's like, oh, all of the puzzles fit together. But at the time, it was sort of a bit of a out of left field for me. And as I said at the start, whilst it answered so many questions for me, it really created a lot of new ones at the same time.
Now, I can relate to that because I too was diagnosed early with ADHD and not until later in life diagnosed with autism. I mean, it was in my late 20s that family members who were psychologists, and even a family lawyer, even my primary care doctor, all saw the traits of autism. And back then, autism wasn't even on the blip on the radar under disabilities or anything. So it's like, oh wow, he's got this. This explains X, Y, and Z and all his little behaviors.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I think also what I find interesting is how it completely changed my perspective on pretty much everything. It was almost like it was almost like putting on a pair of glasses and having perfect vision. And that was both that's both been helpful and difficult to manage, I'll say that. Because whilst I'm seeing everything with complete clarity, I'm also seeing everything with complete clarity, and that can be that can be
Shocking.
it can be shocking. It is exhausting, and it's there's also and this is something that I read up on. There's also a lot of shame that I've felt and that I'm managing because so many situations in the past, all starting from childhood,
Mhm.
things that have happened where I've reacted in a certain way, or I've felt things at such an intensity and I've never understood why. And to replay those moments and understand the reason I behaved like this was because of this,
Mhm.
it, it it still it doesn't necessarily stop the feeling of honestly embarrassment that I would react so intensely with such emotion to situations that to many other people would just be run of the mill. Take a breakup, for example. A breakup that I will sit on and had sat on for years, years and years and years, and not being able to move past the fact that this relationship was done and that I wasn't going to be with this person anymore, and sitting in the emotion of that, of sitting in the pain of it all. as if it had just happened, and suddenly realizing why I'd felt that so intensely, coupled with other contributing factors, realizing why I'd felt that so intensely. As I say, it was like putting on a pair of glasses and seeing everything with such clarity. And at the same time going, oh my goodness, I did what? Oh my goodness, I said what? Oh my goodness, it's
Yeah.
everything suddenly comes back to you. I mean, I don't know if that's something you can relate to, but gosh,
No, I do. I
it's
do.
a
It's
lot.
like for me, it's more like I say something to somebody and they turn around and come back with, you realize that's wrong. And it's like, oh God, how I didn't realize that was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to go and backpedal and explain to that person, listen, I have autism. I only see right or wrong. I don't see that gray area. It's like, I mean, there have been times where somebody's telling a story and they get part of that story wrong, regardless if they're on the telephone or if they're in person telling it. Your brain is telling you it's wrong, and you immediately have to correct them. And then later you get pulled aside and told it's wrong to correct someone in the middle of telling something, a story, because you make them look bad. You need to wait until the end, and your mind is saying, why should I wait till the end? I know you I don't want you to get the story wrong. So we
Yeah.
don't think that way. I mean, but you're right though. I mean, a lot of times things that we did in our past, and when we find out why we did those things, it's like, oh wow, I did that. I didn't realize I did that. I didn't mean to do that. And it's just like this revelation of guilt and depression because we did something wrong and we made our families look bad.
Yeah. 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 100%, definitely. And to 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 follow up with what you said around, for example, correcting somebody when somebody's gotten, look, recanting a story incorrectly,
Mhm.
and maybe not picking up on what other people perceive to be quote unquote normal social cues, normal social etiquettes and understandings. Uh, I find it my biggest thing is I find it so difficult not to respond when I can see in somebody's body language, or I can almost feel the atmosphere changing for somebody when they are uncomfortable in a certain way, or they are wanting something, but they're not necessarily communicating that. Generally, we show how we feel before we say it, and more often than not, we we don't necessarily say exactly what it is that we mean.
Yeah.
But we can't help but show what we mean. Our
Yeah.
face, the way that our face will move will show, well, I'm not happy with that, either with a frown or, just the way that your body language changes. And quite often, if I'm in some sort of group interaction and I will see that that person has changed, their body language has changed, but the person who's talking isn't picking up on that and keeps going and keeps going, I can't tell you how the discomfort is palpable.
Mm.
Because in my head, I'm thinking, this person's telling you they want you to stop. Why are you not seeing this? Look at their face. They're telling you, you need to stop, you need to stop. And then on the flip side, as you've said, where we might interject and say something, we'll be taken to one side and say, well, actually, people don't like that when you interject. It's considered rude. But of course, in my mind, I'm thinking, but you were rude. You didn't look. You weren't listening to the person. They were telling you
Mhm.
that they didn't want to talk about this, or they were uncomfortable. So I'm just saying what this person felt. How is that wrong? As you say, we don't see the grey area. We see the black and white.
Yeah, I mean, we never see the gray area. It's like I've always antiquated autism to driving down the highway and you only have two lanes. You have your fast and your slow. We don't see that middle lane. That's how our minds think, either right or wrong. And a lot of times it's gotten us in trouble, but a lot of times it's helped us because kept us out of trouble. We know when it's right and we know when it's wrong.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. I think I remember when I was diagnosed because I actually more or less figured it out before I went for the diagnosis. As I
Mhm.
say, I was fully expecting it to be autism. I wasn't expecting ADHD to be in the be the primary source, if you like. So I'd kind of come to the conclusion myself. What I went for the diagnosis for was I can't say 100% unequivocally that that's what this is until I've heard it from a professional
Mhm.
psychiatrist. So the getting that confirmation, if you like, it it gave me, as I said before, it was like putting on a pair of glasses and seeing everything with complete clarity. But what it also did was, I remember hearing a lot of people describe it as a superpower and being very, really, really disagreeing with that, thinking it's not a superpower, it's not a help, it's a hindrance, it's caused me more problems than it has ever helped me. And of course, that's always a matter of perspective. I think it really depends on, well, how are you looking at the situation, half empty or half full, pessimist or optimist? And it really, amongst other things, it really gave me an opportunity to sort of step back and see just how quick and how easily and how prone I was to slipping into a negative state of mind, a negative perspective way of looking at things. And consequently, that meant looking back on past experiences, past situations, as I say, feeling that shame and feeling that, oh no, I did this and oh, that's awful and I can't believe that happened. Instead, trying to turn it into, yes, that happened and yes, it was awful, but it's not happening anymore. And thank goodness that I'm able to identify that my reaction at the time really didn't help me. Never mind the situation, it really just made me feel worse. So actually, if I'm ever in this situation again, perhaps I'll try and approach it with a little more stoicism, shall we say, because that's going to help me. That's going to help me massively, you know?
Do you feel that your ADHD or your autism like overpowers one to the other depending on where you are at certain times and situations?
You know, that's a good question. I've actually thought about that myself and wondered it. I think that because I have combined ADHD, so I'm sure you know, but
Yeah, I have that too.
yeah, for
I have
listeners
the
who might,
full-on ADHD. I mean, the only thing I don't have is constant on the go, but I have
yeah,
everything else. I am always hyper. I remember back in school, I couldn't focus on anything unless it was to my interest.
yes,
And
yes,
I can recount stories of my parents getting calls from school saying he's not focusing, he's not paying attention in class except for his general science class. And that right there is my ADHD at its best. And my parents didn't know why until I
hmm
got diagnosed with ADHD. And I'm sure it's like the same with you.
yes, absolutely. And I'll tell you something interesting. I have only recently just sort of started speaking a little bit more about it. About the diagnosis and about my experiences with it and how I'm managing it and that kind of stuff. Because I know that it's been met with a lot of stigma because there's such a because so many because the diagnosis and information is so much more accessible than what it used to be, which is fantastic. What it means is that so many more people are getting the answers that they need, which means, of
True.
course, the numbers are up. There's way more diagnosis than there used to be. But that's met with some stigma, that's met with some resistance. And a lot of people are saying, well, I don't find it interesting, you know, what you've just said about not being able to concentrate on subjects unless you're super interested. I can't focus on subjects that I'm not interested in either. That doesn't mean I've got ADHD. So yes, that's absolutely fine. And nobody for a minute is suggesting that that's the case. But the difference between those with ADHD and those with not is that those with ADHD, where we find something that is interesting, the intensity of that focus is so much that remind me, sorry, what was the subject that you said that you were interested in school?
ADHD, oh, general science.
General science. So if you take yourself back to when you were a kid in school, if somebody came up to you and took away your general science book, for example, and replaced it with a history book, you probably would have had a bit of a freak out. Well, no, no,
Yeah.
no, I don't want to talk about history. I don't want to read about history. I want to read about general science. That's what I'm interested in. Whereas somebody else will go, oh, well, that's not great. I was really enjoying reading that book, but I mean, okay, fair enough. You're telling me to read about history. I get it. I get it. So the difference is it's the intensity. It's the intensity of I've found something that is giving me that dopamine hit. I've got something that's giving me that spike, something that's making me happy, something that is keeping me engaged and focused and interested. If that's taken away from me, I can't just apply that same level of dopamine to this other random thing that you're telling me about because I've got this other thing that I'm interested in. I can't just switch to history because I'm still thinking about general science. So it's the intensity of it that I think is misunderstood. The intensity in general that I think people misunderstand. And I'm very conscious. I think I've gone on a bit of a tangent here. What was your original question?
Is no, it's all right. I mean, that's the purpose of the show, to let people like talk and share their feelings. It's no, but the question was, do you feel that your ADHD or your autism overrides one another at certain points in your life?
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, I think given the way that I've just not answered the question, answers the question.
Now,
Yeah, yeah.
now, do you have any sensory issues?
Yes. So loud noises, and that's one that I'm figuring out how to manage currently. It's a pretty obvious one. I think it's probably we'll have the same thing, but realizing how loud noises was really keeping me from relaxing and uh making sure how I manage that is earplugs, noise cancelling headphones, and honestly just sort of giving myself the grace to acknowledge the fact that I don't like that and it makes me feel uncomfortable. It doesn't matter if everybody else can deal with it. It's making me feel uncomfortable. It's making me feel unhappy. So I need to either remove myself from the situation for a moment or I need to use whatever tools I've got in my toolbox to help me manage it right now. Unfortunately, I live on a main road, so I've got a hospital walking distance that way and a police station just a little further, which means that I've constantly got sirens coming up and down this road. Now I'm a city girl, so I'm used to sirens. It was the sound that would send me to sleep when I was a kid. I'm used to it. But as you get older, you mature, and as you mature, your sensory uh, your allowances for sensory things that also matures, but also changes. And I believe that's definitely what's happened, especially in the last 12 months. Really being aware and listening to how my body and my brain responds to loud noises. It's quite interesting. It's quite interesting how I was when I first really started paying attention to it. The first thing I noticed was that when there was a loud noise that I didn't like, immediately my whole body would tense up. Immediately everything would just go tight like this, and that's my body's way of saying, "Oh no, something's too much. Something's too loud. Something you don't like is happening." Um, and then, as I say, now what I've learned to do is right, let me just take a little break from that. Let me put my headphones on. Let me find there's a YouTube channel that I listen to that will just play some really nice focus music. I'll pop that on and that just keeps me nice. That just relaxes me back down. Or if I'm out, I'll wear loop headphones, earplugs. So that means that I can still hear everybody, I can still talk, I can still communicate, but it's in my ears, nobody can see it, it's nice and discreet, and it just stops the intensity of those loud noises. So yeah, loud noises, that's probably my number one sensory issue.
Now, have you found your hyperfocus?
Right now, podcasting. Yeah, podcasting. And one of the things that I realized when I got diagnosed was how I've got friends, and I had a, a life of sorts, but I didn't have a life, if that makes sense. I didn't my life consisted of getting up, going to work, doing my job, seeing my family, texting with friends, coming home, sleeping, repeating the next day. There was nothing that I had for myself. I didn't have a social circle. I became very much used to just being by myself, which is something that I think is probably quite common for people with ADHD and or autism. We, find peace in isolation.
Mhm.
It's just a lot easier to withdraw and be by yourself. But I realized I didn't want that anymore. I wanted to be sociable. I wanted to have, more of a social life. I wanted to have things that I was interested in. So I thought, right, well, let me just start researching some things that I like. What do I like to do? Well, I'm a creative. Okay, well, what can I do that is creative and but is also going to stimulate me? It's also going to stimulate me. Now, podcasting, I had the idea to start a podcast, unsurprisingly through watching another podcast. And I remember sitting there and watching these three people sat around a table, laughing, chatting, just having fun, enjoying themselves. And I thought, that's what I'm looking for. That's what I'd like. And from there, I started researching the whole process. Well, how does that start? And that really opened me up to a whole array of options as far as creativity was concerned.
Mhm.
Because you can do a podcast about anything you're interested in, you can do a podcast on. But what I loved the most about it was the intricacies of it. It's such a, I mean, you have your own podcast. There's a lot of work that goes into it. It's not just a case of hit record and upload and that's it. There's audio things that you've got to know about. There's editing things that you've got to know about. But the biggest and most attractive challenge about podcasting for me was integrating myself socially. It was having conversations with people that I'd never met before
Yep.
and having conversations on things that I wasn't educated on, but that meant that it was opening me up to being educated on them.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, being a podcaster is my hyper focus. I don't see it being something that I'm going to give up anytime soon and get bored with because it can evolve into so many other things, right?
Right. I mean,
The freedom that it's given me and the friends that I've made, the people that I've been introduced to, just from making the decision one day of sitting on my sofa and watching a podcast on the TV, I'd like to think that it's going to be endless. So yeah, podcasting, that's my hyper focus.
no, I totally agree with you on that because before I started podcasting, I was very much like you, kind of like keeping to my own self, my own circle, not talking to many people. And I remember my life coach saying, you need to talk to more people, you need to get out more. And and I remember my mother telling me when I got back from school, I should do a podcast because I've done so much. And like you, I did my research. What equipment I needed, who's the best host, how should I go about doing this? What should I talk about? And I started off going solo, and it was the hardest thing in the world to do. I when you start editing, you start hearing your breath and everything, and you know that, and you're like, oh God, I gotta clean that up, and then I decided, and then my coach told me, why don't you try bringing experts in, people to talk to, because then it becomes more back and forth. And you have experts, and then that's what draws your guests in because now they have somebody to who they can relate to who's an expert in that field. And then it just blew up. I think the hardest thing for me is remembering to put them up on socials.
Yes. Yeah. I created a spreadsheet. It was like a tick box checklist, if you like. After releasing a few episodes, I went away, did some research again, as the and sort of like the post-production side of podcasting and what to do. And I found a few really, really helpful links. And there was a suggestion for this checklist of, right, have you shared it on your socials? If so, which socials have you shared it on? And it's just giving yourself that physical layout there in front of your face to remind you, okay, yeah, okay, have I done that? No, I haven't ticked the box. Right, let me go away and do that. Yeah, I'm like you, remembering to upload to social, share on socials, marketing in general, but doing it consistently, I think is my challenge right now. Because I will record an episode and I'll be all over the socials, but then I might record another episode and I won't be as visible with it as I was the previous episode. So consistency seems to be my challenge at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because, I mean, once you get inundated with guests and stuff, and then it becomes, all right, now I got to remember to send them their socials to get their show up. I have my show going up in several different places. I just put mine up on Substack, but my show is not just on my host, it's up on my blog, it's on YouTube. So I do double editing.
Hmm. It's a lot of work, but I like the challenge of it. I
Yeah.
really enjoy, and as strange as it might sound, I enjoy the mistakes. I enjoy getting it wrong or watching it back and realizing, oh, I didn't quite articulate myself the way that I wanted to there, or oh, I can see I'm really getting in my head there. I enjoy the discomfort of it, um, because it's really showing opportunities for growth and seeing where. And this is not to sound big-headed or self-aggrandizing or anything like that, but to see where I am now versus where I was a year ago is I can see how much I've changed. I can see how much I'm how much more sociable I am, and actually how much more comfortable I am
Hmm.
with just having conversations
Yeah.
and just I no longer feel that I'm necessarily, as I mentioned in the beginning, on the periphery of conversations. I feel very much in the driver's seat and most importantly, really comfortable with myself in that driver's seat, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it was the same thing with me. It's like in the very beginning, I was just uncomfortable. I started and then I was uncomfortable because I was just having questions and I wanted it to make it sound more conversation than just ask a question, answer a question, ask. And as time went on, there were guests that I really enjoyed talking to, like such as yourself, where it just became a full-on conversation
Yes.
with like little questions peppered in. And now I just use my questions as more of a roadmap of, okay, is this topic discussed? Did we discuss this? Did we discuss that?
Hmm.
And it's it becomes enjoyable. And I'm sure you get to that point where when you have somebody on your show, it's just like, oh my God, it's just a relaxed conversation.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And it's so interesting to see what you mentioned at the start about how we are very binary thinkers. It's either
Hmm.
black or white, it's one or zero. It's interesting to see how we've adopted our own grey area thinking when it comes to podcasting or grey area communicating, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
In what you said about you don't want it to be just question and answer. You want it to be a very free flowing line of dialogue.
Yeah.
Finding a way to get into that comfortably it's very challenging, but it's quite interesting to see how naturally you slip into it. At least it was for me, how you naturally slip into it with guests. I mean, it doesn't work with all guests, don't get me wrong. There are some that feel a little bit, sometimes maybe a little bit more uh structured, if that
Hmm.
makes sense, the way
Yeah,
that
that
the conversation is. But having your questions as that framework is a having your questions as a framework is of course massively helpful. It's a good sort of like framework to fall back on. but it's the conversations always feel much more, what's the word I'm looking for?
Authentic.
Yes, much more authentic when it's just like this, where it's just back and
Yeah.
forth, back and forth. There's no limitation. It's not just, here is my question, now here is my answer, you know?
I mean, one of the things I enjoy, and I'm pretty sure you do too, about podcasting is you're learning so much.
Mm,
When you have an expert in the field or anything, you're learning from them. You're making new friends and you're making new connections and but you're learning about whatever you're talking about.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And understanding the biggest thing that I'm learning right now is I became very interested in grief and loss and how that affects people, how it changes people. For context, very, very long story short, unfortunately, we lost a couple of people in my family over the past couple of years, and it's been a horrific couple of years. It has completely changed our family. It's really, and it's completely changed me. I'd experienced loss before,
Hmm.
but to experience a loss that was so close to home and to see the ripple effect of that loss was totally unprecedented for
Hmm.
me. And to receive the diagnosis sort of around the same time as well, it, it, it's uh, it, it's really just been a complete mind blower for me. So I've been having a lot of conversations with with guests around mental health, particularly around men's mental health, because unfortunately one of the losses was to suicide, and it was dreadful. It was awful, and we'd not we've been very fortunate not to have had that in our family previously, so it was a completely new loss to experience because you don't get the answers, you don't get the closure. It's so abrupt and it's so there's no closure on it. You'll never understand why. You know, when somebody dies of natural causes, you can say, well, they were
Hmm.
sick. I understand. Of course, it's awful, but they were sick. When somebody chooses to take their own life, it's you have no answers for it, and you never will get answers for it. And it's dreadful. So having these conversations around mental health and men's mental health was really giving me the education that I didn't have before, and in a way, it's giving me a little bit of closure. It's giving me a little bit of an understanding that whilst I will never completely fully get the answers as to why my uncle made the decision that he made, it's giving me some insight into the world of men's mental health. And I never would have found any of that out had I not started podcasting and asking men these questions. Well, tell me about it. And has it ever affected you? Well, what happened to you? And hearing people's experiences with loss and grief really gave me a fully rounded view of it's you're not alone in this, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
What is unbelievably horrific and what really hurts you is shared, unfortunately, shared by so many others. And as weird as this may sound, that's comforting. And I never would have gotten that comfort in that way had I not started podcasting, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel you. Long time ago, we lost someone to suicide. He was the son of of one of our family friends, and they were just visiting us not too long ago, and I was like the last person they talked to because I was the last person he talked to, and they all came to me and say, Reed, how was he when you were talking with him? I'm like, he was happy. He was looking forward to going back home, starting school and everything else. I didn't see any signs of him wanting to do this. And then it
Mm.
just affects you. And especially when you're autistic, death affects us so differently. I mean, I lost my father in 2017, and at the funeral, I couldn't shed a tear.
Yeah, yeah. At my nanny's funeral, she passed about 7 or 8 months prior to losing my uncle. At her funeral, I didn't. And I remember in my mind thinking, what does this mean? What does this mean that I'm not getting emotional? Why am I not getting emotional for her?
Mhm.
Did I not love her as much as I thought I did? What does this mean? I couldn't understand why I couldn't get emotional. Um, and I think I think it was probably a combination of shock.
Mhm.
I think it was being super self-conscious. Um, because I remember in the weeks afterwards really honestly just breaking down, having
Mhm.
the intensity of everything, of the reality of everything. Suddenly the realization, the finality of it hit me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And feeling all of the emotions, everything everywhere all at once. It wasn't a case of day by day I would
Yeah.
feel things. It was days of nothing, and then suddenly day one of feeling everything.
Everything. Yep.
Yeah.
I had that exact feeling. I was walking my dog, talking on the phone with my friend, trying to get him to come to the services we have. When you're Jewish, we have Shiva, kind of like a
Mm,
wake where you all come to and sit. And my friend's like, I can't come, I work. I'm like, come on, come on. And when I hung up with him, all this stuff just came in on me, and I broke down in tears when I got home. And my mom's like, I'm like, my mom, I'm like, why am I crying? I can't come. My mom is like, your father was like your best friend.
mm,
And that's why you are so emotional right now.
mm,
And it's like all these feelings. And then days afterwards, after everything, it's just like you have this feeling of, is that the presence is still there? And I couldn't shake that feeling. Both me and my mother couldn't shake that feeling. And it's just like we were, as my mom would put it, we were waiting for him to walk through that door.
yes. Yeah.
Like like nothing happened and that they didn't die. Because I remember my mother saying when she was in the hospital with my father, when the pulmonary doctor came in and said, have you contacted your family? And my mom's like, why? And he's like, you don't realize the situation. She's like, no. She's like, he's like, you better contact your family. And then that's when the shock just hits you hard.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a similar kind of story with my nanny. She had a sudden change in, I remember her behavior just sort of changing. Something, we couldn't quite put our finger on what it was, but something had changed. And we thought initially that it may have been dementia. And we had a conversation that, maybe she should go to the doctors and, get the relevant tests and stuff like that. And anyway, it transpired that it was cancer,
Oh
and
God.
it was stage 4. It was pancreatic cancer. Which
Ugh.
unfortunately, pancreatic cancer is the one that it's found when it's basically too late. So the conversation very quickly went from what can we do to make Nanny better into what do we do to make her comfortable,
Hmm.
and it was dreadful. It was unbelievable. It was like torture, to
Yeah.
to see it. And of course, now looking back, it all seemed to have happened in the blink of an eye, but at the time, it felt like an eternity. And it was really tough. It was really, really tough. But I'll tell you this, the thing that I learned, and as naive as this might sound, this is the truth. The thing that I learned when we lost her was it reminded me we're all human,
Mhm.
and at some point we are all go this is all this will happen to all of us. I don't mean that in the sense that we will all, unfortunately go the way that she went, but we're alive, we're not immortal.
Yeah.
You only have one
My,
life.
my thoughts exactly because when my father died of cancer as well, and it took him within a month.
Yeah, same.
Diagnosed in July, died in August.
Yeah.
Family was in shock, and at that point, like you said, we look at ourselves and we think, as children, we thought our parents would be immortal.
Mm,
They'd live to be old and watch us grow up and have families. And
Mm,
then something happens. And
yeah.
like you with your nanny, with your nana, I knew something was different with my father because all of a sudden I could hear he sounded like he was wheezing more. First they thought he had pneumonia and he went and they took care of that and then he was still wheezing and then he went back and they did the test and he had a tumor in his lung,
Mm,
collapsed part of his lower lung, and he went for two treatments. Doctor says, I don't like the way you look. Sends him to the hospital and that was it.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're right. At that point, we look at ourselves like no one's immortal. Everyone lives, everyone dies. We only
Yeah.
have one life to live. And that's why I wrote a book called Fearless Footsteps, Embracing the World One Step at a Time. It will be coming out soon. It's in editing now, but it's all about why we as autistics need to step out of our comfort zones.
I
We only
love
have
them.
we only have one life.
Yeah.
And if we don't leave our zone of comfort, the world will keep moving. Your
Mm,
parents will be gone, you'll be alone. And if we don't have the social skills, your family never taught you those. And I say it, I mean, you're not going to know how to talk to your doctors or your insurance companies or make phone calls to the bank. These are important things, balancing a checkbook.
mm.
You need to step out of your comfort zone and realize the world's only so small, so big, but all the negative stuff is only this much. There's so much more
Yeah.
beauty to the world.
Oh, it's so true. I love the way you've put that. I love the fact that you've written a book about it as well because you don't see that conversation isn't necessarily being had.
No,
Um,
because I mean,
so
because
important.
people don't realize it. I mean, you look at all the books for autism, it's either advice for clinicians, for younger, some for adults, but nothing, or even some that do share the life, but it's all on about the negative side, but nothing about sharing the life and showing the positivity. And hey, I did this, you can do this too.
Mm,
That's what my book's
mm,
all about. It takes you through my life from beginning to end and with stories mixed in and a little bit of advice here and there, but with the important message of you need to step outside. The world's a
yeah,
big place and you only have one life to live.
it's so true. It's so true. What would you say is the biggest step you've taken so far in your life to stepping outside of your comfort zone?
The biggest step would be going to school.
Yeah?
Yes, because I've been a homebody my whole entire life. I got my bachelor's online and I thought to myself, I missed out on the whole college experience of sleeping, living in a dorm, living away from home, and I wanted that experience. And and then the other thing was I needed to prove to myself I can live on my own when the time comes.
Mm,
And but that was only part of my biggest step. My other biggest step was I traveled through Europe for 6 weeks on my
wow.
own.
Wow. Was it scary?
It was because it meant I had to learn how to manage time, manage my money, make sure I didn't run out of money when I was traveling, learn to get to places. I mean, I had some mistakes and I time wise, I had two back-to-back things and I missed one of my trips, but because the other one ended just when I had to get to the other place and it was just too much of a hassle for me to get to that other spot.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I made some mistakes, I mean, but I learned from them.
Yes. And that's the most important part is learning from it and not just sitting in the discomfort of the shame that you'd feel from the mistake that you made. Because
Yeah,
that will stop you dead in your tracks. And it did for me. It did for me for so many years, as I said before, where a relationship had broken down, something had ended, whatever it was, and I sat in the
the
in the
wallow.
pain of that for years.
I mean, the problem is we, if you don't get past, like you said, if you don't get past your mistake, you're gonna sit in misery and not be happy.
Yeah.
And what we gotta do is take that as a learning experience
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
move on.
Hmm.
And that's one of the things I mentioned in my book is an experience is an experience, good or bad. It's something you can check mark on your little checkbook of life. I did
Hmm.
this, but you can't let one little negative experience stop you from living your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And also, I think this is where I take it. I started reading a little bit about Stoicism, and I forget the philosopher that said it, but and I'm certainly paraphrasing here, but he said something along the lines of when something, something bad is happening, how you react to it essentially defines how bad it is. Listen, horrible things happen. Don't get me wrong. I'm not for a minute suggesting, right, do not react to it whatsoever. Have your reaction, 100%. But if the thing happens and you're still letting it affect you weeks, days, months, years after the fact, if you're still sitting in it, at that point the question becomes, well, who's responsible? Is the thing that happened the thing that's responsible for making you feel the way you're feeling? Or is it you sitting in it and allowing yourself to continue feeling the way you're feeling, responsible for how you're feeling, if that makes sense, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we live the life we lead. I mean, and that's what we have to do.
Hmm. Straight up. Yeah. That's so cool that you wrote a book.
And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Reed Miles. And actually, Shawnee, before I end, where can people find out more about you and
So
your podcast?
you can find me on YouTube where you can find my podcast, What's the Latest with Shawnee and Co. That's at Shawnee-WTL. You can find me on Instagram at what's.the latest, and you can find me on Facebook under Shawnee Farrell.
And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Reed Miles. That was Shawnee Farrell, and I'll see you on the next one. Thank you, Shawnee.
Thank you. Bye.